All right, so hello everybody. Happy Wednesday. Is that what day it is? Oh, I'm going to dismiss the transcript because I don't want to see it. Okay. So right now it's just Alyssa and I. Sorry, Alyssa. And there are a few of us more who are anticipated joining us. And if not, that's okay. Alyssa and I can have a conversation. The topic today, and if there's anyone else in the room that wants to chime in, feel free to join us if and when you can. The topic today is practicing our counseling skills, right? So we've technically done 3 videos, 2 of which were practicing skills. I get the benefit of not only watching everybody's videos, but then also hearing all of your feedback on each other's videos. And so this is one of those conversations that we have that helps, not that we're going to divulge what people have said privately, but helps us talk a little bit more openly about the elements of practicing our skills, that perhaps have been challenging, or those where we're seeing, some of you already are demonstrating growth. I think it's kind of a fun thing. Everybody starts off with like videos and on YouTube, what are you talking about? And then what I've noticed is that right away when students start posting their own videos, we already can see those issues that maybe we should work on within ours. And then you don't really have to watch very many of your classmates before you start to see some of us are really skilled and doing really well at this, and others maybe have some other things to work on. So Alyssa, since you were the first to join us, and Alexis, welcome. Feel free to keep yourself muted if you need to. I totally understand.
No, it's okay. There's just people coming in and out, so I might have to like mute
It's
myself.
totally fine.
Noisy.
No, after teaching from home, and I have 2 dogs, and then I was teaching a 2:15 to 3:30 class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the mail carrier would come at 2:30, and I'm like, I'm trying to teach. My dogs are freaking out. What
Yeah,
am I supposed to
I
do?
currently have a puppy sleeping in the
Oh,
crook of my leg. So
ah, oh my gosh, I can smell its breath. Okay, focus, Lori. So either of you, whoever wants to start. So what are some of the reactions we have so far to practicing the skills?
I can go first. So this is something that's really new to me, but also not new to me. So I'm one of the graduate students in the class. So I'm in the Masters of Health Ed Promotion. But my bachelor's degree is in psychology, so we didn't really practice per se, like counseling. We did a lot more like research and like how we should counsel. So actually getting to do it is really cool because I feel like I'm actually getting to use my psych degree finally.
Nice.
But yeah, it's going really well. It's really interesting to see. My partner has been in all of my videos with me and has been absolutely a gem with helping me with that. And yeah, it's just been a really different experience and out of my comfort zone, and I'm really appreciating it.
So how does it translate, do you think? So I'm guessing with a psych background, there's probably, granted it was an undergraduate degree, right? So it's not like they were prepping you to be a clinician, but there were some of probably the similar strategies and techniques. Um, and so how has that translated so far to like practicing the role plays?
Yeah, so one of the classes I took was Intro to Clinical Psychology in undergrad, and obviously we had to be very careful with patient confidentiality and things like that. So getting to actually like sit in the room, like welcome them, ask them for like a glass of water and stuff is like something that like we were able to see. We had to like be mindful of things like accepting gifts and stuff. I know that's not something that we're doing, but like just seeing it like translate over from what I have learned. um, the people in all the videos that I've seen were always very welcoming, created a really nice environment, and then provided like a lot of resources. And so, since I'm not a certified health ed specialist just yet, I do whatever I can like in these videos to like really just offer my support and like the resources on campus that we have, because most of the ones I've done has been like with students. So
Great. And it's part of kind of what you do with your job, really, right? And so some of the, um, yeah, okay. How about you, Alexis?
I I feel like really awkward when I film the videos because like it's always just awkward filming yourself. But I feel like I do like a pretty good job. My boyfriend is my co-star, I should say, and he um loves to figure out what character he gets to be during the videos. So that makes it a little easier. But I mean, I feel like, they're still like awkward and like uncomfortable trying to like figure out how to like go about it, I guess sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But then like once you like are like filming and like get into it, I feel like it's not as like bad.
I think students in general, once we all get over, we're recording ourselves, right? And nobody likes how they look or what they sound like, which that always makes me laugh. I didn't like it at first either. And then you remember that like, that's how everybody else hears your voice. So why not you hear it that way too? But then I think we do sometimes struggle with, well, what do I say? What do I do? Right. And the magic, I think, really is to learn to be the one saying the least amount, right? And to really just starting with the client. And so many of you have been so good at saying, so tell me how I can help you today, right? Which is the exact same thing if a student comes in for academic advising. We'll chat a little bit and then I'll say, so how can I, what brings you in? And then I just let them start talking and then ask more questions and help sort of pull them into, okay, so you're not happy in this class. What about in the major, right? And we just kind of help them move through their own understanding. And I think that's where our last live video ended up being me just talking with myself, right? But so I talked a little bit about the advice piece simply because that's the one where I get the most pushback. But can you think of other spaces where where the struggle might have been with your classmates or yourselves in terms of watching their videos? With what part of the practice has been maybe something that we could work on a little bit more? And we don't like to be critical of each other, but it's all friendly. It's okay.
So something that I think that is like difficult when the person is like taking it in a more serious manner, and like trying, like I think when we first did the first video, my boyfriend and I had to like do like 10 takes because we were just giggling at each other, seeing each other in that role. And
the giggles actually don't bother me. I don't really mind if you all show up as human. I really feel bad for folks who are like, this is the 20th time, or I had to edit out all the bloopers. And it's like, well, the bloopers make you human, right? I mean, keep in mind that these used to be role plays in class. And frankly, only half the groups were even doing the role plays, right? And so we're going to have those, even when you're working with a client, you're going to have a cell phone go off or an interruption that you need to recover from. So yeah, I can totally appreciate that, Alyssa. I'm sorry that I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna say, like, finding like that comfortability, and just knowing that like we're all not judging here. It's a very safe zone. I'm still like in my position working as like with conflict resolution. That's something so new to me. And like I have to sit two students down and kind of like have a discussion with them. And that's hard, like, because when you want to like please everybody. So just like going through that has been helpful with the videos too. I've gained a lot of skills from that.
And also like staying out of it, right? I mean, essentially, exactly in that conversation, you're there to help those two people communicate with each other. And really, to the extent that you can, try to not involve your own opinions or feelings or ideas or reactions. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely difficult, like taking like a step back and you're like, okay, I'm here as a resource. How do I help you today?
Well, when we go back to, and of course, I'm going to say the 90s because I'm old, but that old school, like, so what I heard Alyssa saying was, now, Alyssa, did you hear what Alexis said? Alexis said, right? And then just trying to make sure that, because I get into these with my spouse too, and I'll be like, that's not what I said. That might be what you heard, but that's not what I said. Let me clarify, right? So then we just restate to make sure. And obviously that's conflict negotiation. But still, when we're talking to a client, we can say, so what do you think about that? Right? And try to make sure we get that feedback. I mean, everyone, it's always interesting to me because we end up getting quasi comfortable by video 3. And then video 4 is a little bit intense, right? Because again, those higher order skills become confrontation, which is a word nobody likes. But sometimes it's really simple as like, hey, Alexis, we've been talking for a few weeks now, and you've set this goal or this intention, and it doesn't seem like that's working. How might we reconfigure it? right? So we're not necessarily calling anybody out, although I just did to Alexis just as a fake example, right? And saying, you didn't do what you said. But we are kind of saying like, hey, these are your goals. And if you're not reaching them, maybe we need to reevaluate what they should be, right? And rethink about how we might position it in a way that's more likely to be successful for the client. Because again, health coaching is all about helping them reach some level of health behavior change that they're really the ones looking for. So, Alexis, so now how about you? Like, what are some things you've noticed in the videos, either making them yourselves or watching others, that folks are, well, let's flip the coin, doing well?
I think people are doing like really well with like making sure the person feels comfortable and like welcome, like at the beginning of the video, and like really like listening to what they have to say, even if it was something like that they kind of like pre-planned before they filmed the video of like, okay, like this is how it's kind of gonna go. But it just like they make it seem like it like is more like natural and it flows like more naturally, so it doesn't seem like it's super scripted.
Right.
So that's something like I noticed like in pretty much all of the videos is like they seem to like have like a flow to the conversation. It's not just like reading off of a script.
Yeah, I actually had to like interfere a little bit last semester, which was the first time ever that I had to do it. And I had to say, first of all, no ghost videos. Students who would have like a partner off camera or just a fake partner where they were actually talking to themselves as two different people. And I was like, no, especially because the class is so big and there are always people struggling to find a partner. And so it's like, well, hook up with each other. You both have to do the assignment, and then you're not tapping in someone that you might not want to expose, just like you would in class, work with the person next to you, so to speak, right? But yeah, it's not super helpful that I like all the really entertaining ones. I was watching one yesterday where the person was like storming around their apartment while they were having the conversation. And I was like, okay, I kind of like this because it's realistic. But at the same time, I think some of the issues with role play number 3 that I should consider changing is that the suicidal student is a student. And so you'll notice in a lot of those videos, people are saying like, no, it's just between us. And it's like, yeah, no, it's actually not. If you're working in a school with minors, the second you have that, there's a whole legal, we are mandated reporters, even at the university level, frankly. But at the university level, I still will say to a student, like, okay, now that you've shared this with me, I need you to understand that there are some additional things that I need to do here. What would make you the most comfortable in my way of doing that, and I do it probably the biggest one is with Title IX, right? So if you've shared with me a sexual assault, I have to report that to Title IX, but I'm willing to do that to the extent that you're comfortable with it. And then I'll usually also have a conversation with them about what reporting it to Title IX really means, right? And it actually doesn't require them to do anything. But in a K-12 situation, a student cannot tell us that they feel suicidal and expect us to keep that to ourselves, right? But again, we don't all work in those spaces where we would be mandated reporters. So that's one thing to think about. All right. I do think, we always owe a shout out to our role play partners, because I think they think they're helping us with something for class and then maybe quickly realize that they have to do all the work. And there's where I don't really feel that apologetic about it, though, because then notice some of our friends really enjoy the creative expression of acting in a certain way or pretending to be mad or upset or frustrated or whatever. And so, but that is also really how it goes, where we are just following the person wherever they go. And sometimes it is like, okay, I'm not exactly sure how we got to here, right? Because we were talking about meditation habits, or we were talking about you wanting to get better sleep. Because again, in health coaching, we're always trying to help the person generally in health positive ways, right? And sometimes the conversations can go in ways that aren't really helpful or meaningful, right? If we spend time in conversation, that can be fun and interesting and engaging as people, but we do want to make sure that we're staying on the task with the people. So that piece, I think, can be a little bit tricky. How else might the role plays differentiate from like a real life experience of this?
I'm trying to think.
I mean, I know students sometimes feel a little confined by
Right.
because the role play is kind of contrived. So there are certain things, although I'm never going to interfere with someone's creative application, wherever it goes, I'm
Right.
really okay with.
So I did the suicidal one for the last one, and so
Mhm.
like, my partner did that. But he took it in like a very like I'm just gonna be like a really shy student and kind of just say like yeah like okay like thank you like that kind of position. That
Mhm.
might not be the case, especially if it's like a young high schooler, which I think the scenario was. They might be way more distraught and like might get upset and like angry that you even like brought them into the classroom to begin with to have this conversation. Like it could have just been that we're just using it as like a creative outlet, but it's serious and it's something we need to bring to their attention. So I think just like
Yeah.
acknowledging that not everyone will have the same type of reaction as the people that play the roles with us do.
For sure. I will say that in general, health coaching clients come to us though.
Mhm.
So in general, they're here for a reason. And I think, oftentimes we worry that like, well, I've only practiced it in a role play in real life, it's going to be harder. And I actually think the opposite is true because in the role play, as you all have talked about, these are our romantic partners, our roommates, our friends, a classmate. And so we do want to make sure that we're helping them. And the person, even if they're acting, aren't doesn't really have their own like values in terms of what they want this outcome to be, right? So
Mhm.
they're likely going to be a little bit more compliant, right? So if they say, well, I was really thinking I would want to work on this, but then we direct them over here, a real client might just, like a friend is going to just follow us because this is for a class and they don't want to get us in trouble, right? But a real client might say, well, that's not what I meant, right? What I meant was this. Come back over here where I was. I in a way that I actually think in general, real clients are way easier because it's also a lot easier to stay out of people we don't really know's business. Right? Whereas here, when our cousin, our friend, our romantic partner, even outside of a role play, is sharing something with us, like as hard as I might try to be objective about my spouse's choices, I'm invested in their choices. So I can try, and I joke, I'm like, I can be your wife right now, or your best friend, or just someone you're talking to. Help me situate my head because the wife actually does have different needs and expectations than the best friend. Right? Those two aren't always going to have the same understanding of what maybe you should do. And so when we don't have that personal relationship with them, or at least we're not invested in whatever it is they're talking about, it can actually make it even a lot easier to stay separate from it and just help the person follow. Because even though in truth, the outcomes might be more more risky, we actually feel less invested, if that makes sense, in terms of what that person might actually decide to do, right? So I tried, like my spouse almost a year ago quit chewing tobacco after all these years, which is embarrassing even to talk about. But it was like, all of these years that I've been together, 30 of them, I just kind of said, yeah, you really should think about that. Yeah, you really should. But I wasn't going to um, nag, right, or be problematic about it. And so then when push came to shove, his figuring it out actually didn't involve me because there again, the pull back into like, well, what do you want to do about this? And what do you think was something that actually was less likely to work for him than it was to work for me because I could pull back and stay neutral. But he's still talking to his spouse, right? Rather than an independent person who, again, is not invested and has really no skin in the game in terms of what the outcome of that might be. What about if a client gets upset? And Alyssa, when we deal with students, they get upset all the time. So I know you have practice with this.
Um, uh, okay, so I would say like I'm not like how we handle the situation if they get upset. Okay.
Yeah, like what
Um,
are our concerns? Some of us are
right.
I wanted my mentor, I always wanted to buy her the book, and I can't even remember the name of the woman who wrote it, but the title was Like, if you need to cry, get out of my office, I think is what she called it. And I was like, my mentor needs that book, because she was like, there's no crying in baseball. If you need to cry, go do it someplace else. I do not have that rule in my office. I've thought about it because there are a lot of tears happen here, but I also think people need a safe space. And so crying is just one example, right? So when a person starts to have like a little bit of a meltdown or a breakdown or an emotional reaction to something, what do we do?
Yes, I have actually had this happen last summer. A
Oh
student
my
came
gosh, it doesn't
to my
happen every
office.
week. It happens every week to me.
Well, yeah, this is like my biggest one. The other ones are like easier, I guess, to like handle. This was a situation where a student came bawling to my office. Title IX had to get involved. It was very heavy. It was my first time dealing with something that serious too. And it was, I had to like go to like my boss for like advice because it was above me as a graduate assistant. Um, but we had a conversation, and my biggest thing, like when someone is like having a meltdown, is like we take a minute. Like I let them get their feelings. I kind of just sit back. I'll even like distract myself so they're not just like me staring at them while they're
Right. Do you need to
showing these
cry?
like
Yeah.
emotions. Right.
Yeah.
So I think just like taking a second, letting them get together, and then we can like kind of like talk it out, go for a walk. I always offer to like go for a walk and just like get our feelings out and just like go ahead and vent away. Like I'm here to listen. Like let's talk about this, and then we figure out like a solution from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the trick is to find a place to be comfortable with other people's emotions, right? And here again, in a health coaching situation, this can be easier because we don't often have that same intimacy or that intimate relationship with the person. But it also can be more difficult because not everybody's comfortable with anger or fear or tears or being upset, right? And so I think it's important to have like practiced sayings that we can come up with. So, because I think there's a difference between a person gets upset and a person is getting upset as a result of something maybe we've said or done, right? And so just trying to check in, it seems like you're feeling a little upset. And that's not a practiced good one, but do you need a minute, or is there something I can help you with? Right? So we can kind of check, because we do want to make sure if they're reacting or responding to us, that we make sure we have an opportunity to clarify that and repair it if it needs repaired, right? But if they're just needing a moment because they're having an insecurity or a fear or something that they're thinking about wanting to talk to us about and just don't quite know how or how to bring it up, sometimes just giving them that space can be helpful. And being able to also just sit in their silence, even, which would be the opposite, right? The absence of their response. So we might say to someone like, well, how does that make you feel? And then they might have an emotional reaction, or they might just sit there and they might need a minute. And sometimes it's an actual minute, and usually it's just like 20 seconds that feels like 20 minutes, right? Where they might not have those verbal fillers where they say things like, yeah, I don't know, let me think about that for a second, I'm not quite sure. They might just give us that blank stare, And so getting comfortable with their silence as well as their emotions can really help us in that. And so I don't mean that to be ironic, because again, it is about practicing skills, but I do think we need to think about these things. I started as a GA a really long time ago, and fortunately I'm in health ed, so we get human skills, but still no one taught me how to handle a student passing out in my class, right? And so I would have students every now and then, when I showed the birth video or whatever, pass out. And then I'm like, okay, what do I do? Right? And I know how to react to that student, but if it's in a room full of 70 students and it's at the beginning of the class versus the end, where I can be like, everybody go, I have this, and like handle that private thing. And so those are the kinds of things I'm thinking about in terms of practicing our health coaching skills, is what are the things that could happen in a real life situation that we want to be prepared, to handle. And frankly, I find people's getting upset a lot more easy to handle than like they're getting really angry or, having other types of issues. And very rarely in a health coaching situation, do people get angry. But there again, as a faculty, especially in some of my roles, I have to say to people like, I recognize that this might feel very disappointing to you, or that you might have some feelings about this that you might want to share with me or someone else, just to, again, say like the feelings are fine, and we can talk about it, or we can try to help, maneuver the situation such that we can find someone else that might be able to help.
Dr. Wagner, I have a question.
Yeah, great.
Can you discuss a little bit about the concept of transference and how it's tying into exactly what you're talking about with roles?
Yeah, sure. Tell me a little bit more about your question specifically.
Just like how to handle it, I think that ties into like describing your role and stuff, but I think it's a complicated issue to address.
So I guess let's just clarify, because not everybody might know what transference means. So do you mean when the client is doing that to us, or when we're having feelings about them?
Mainly client going to us is what I would like to hear about. And I have a definition pulled up so everyone can be on the same page. Transference describes a situation where the feelings, desires, and expectations of one person are redirected and applied to another person.
Yeah. And so, and that's why I was asking, because I come from a family where there's a whole bunch of like mental health issues, right? And so I have a birth parent who has struggled with borderline personality disorder. And so I notice some of those characteristics in people sometimes, and they trigger my reactions and responses, right? But what Caitlin is asking about is different than that, where a client might start to have feelings, and it might be similar. It might be that, we're telling them the same thing that their grandma always said to them growing up, and they still don't appreciate it coming from us, right? Or sometimes it is like, I've never understood this one too much, but like romantic feelings, right? Where all of a sudden the person starts to feel attracted to us, or, where they really want the expectations to be appreciated by us. And there's frankly where some of that like avoiding advice stuff comes into play, right? Because the client is not in this health coaching relationship to meet some goal or expectation that we've set, that we are invested in the outcome of. And I think that's one of the most difficult things our health ed students have to learn, is that we can do all this work and the person can still choose to use drugs, right? Speed, not use contraceptives, whatever the thing is that we're trying to help them with. And we really have to find a way to just be okay with that. Pardon me, because individuals' choices are their own. And so I think if we try to keep that separation, and Caitlin, you'll have to let me know if I'm helping you with this answer or making it worse, where, when we recognize those feelings, sometimes I will acknowledge them. I might say like, I'm getting the sense that you're feeling like you've disappointed me or let me down in some way. And I just wanted to be clear that I don't have those expectations, or that I'm really here to be there for you. I'm going to pause and give Caitlin a second to say, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, or no, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that was really helpful. And if you could carry on about the expectations part, like if they start, like boundaries were set in the beginning, but sessions go by and they start to expect things outside of the parameters that you discussed about health coaching, and they start to pull in all these, maybe outside relationships and advice, like, give me advice. What do I do?
Yeah, that triggered me to want to say, it sounds to me like you might want to consider visiting like a mental health or relationship specialist, right? That might be, it does sound like this relationship with your roommate or your partner is something that's potentially putting a little glitch in your opportunity to make this better health choice for yourself. And so have you thought about, and then it's like the redirecting and the referring out to other people. And that is, I think all of this involves an ego clutch, right? Because we're all generally here because we want to help people. And it is kind of easy to see on the outside what we think might be helpful for a person. And so it is all about pausing our own self. So we can say like, oh gosh, I have opinions, but this is really outside of what I should be talking about. That's the internal message, right? And then we just help direct the person and say, gosh, I really wish, I know, like, aren't therapists so much better? Like, this is really something that a therapist might really be able to help you with. Do you have one, or do you know where to find one, or can I help you with that? Right. And not get
Right.
our ego like checked, like, oh, this person's into me. They really want to know what I think, you know?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Good question. All right. Well, that brings us to our time today. So I am going to go ahead and pause our recording.